Look at this crazy dude. That's a Canadian, but he's not a salty Canadian. That's me. Hi, I'm Edwin. I'm going to be teaching you Pebble development. We will be covering window. Alright guys, so if you're with me right now, it must mean that you're taking a break from Pokemon Go. I know it's been really hard for me to stop, but here I am filming this tutorial. By the way, if you're on Team Valor, props to you, best team, and Team Instinct sucks. Anyway, let's get started. So here we are on CloudPebble. We do not have our project set up, and that's what we're going to be doing. So, log in and everything, click the Create button, and type in for your project name. Since we're going to be building a weather app, I'm just going to call it weather app, but you can call it whatever you like. We're going to be using the Pebble C SDK for the project type, and the SDK version is going to be SDK 3. We are not going to be using SDK 2. The template, leave this as an empty project, and click Create. It'll set you up, and you'll have a blank template project. So, let's start with settings up here. So, the project name, same as before, SDK version. These three checkboxes we're going to cover right now. So app light is black and white original Pebble watches, so that includes the original Pebble and the Pebble Steel. Basalt is the Pebble Time and the Pebble Time Steel, and Chalk is the Pebble Time Round and any models of Pebble Time Round. To keep this tutorial simple, we're going to be discluding, we're not going to be including Chalk support, because its screen is actually different dimensions. If you haven't seen the Pebble Time Round, the screen is technically 180 by 180, whereas these screens, the Applite and Basalt, are 144 by 168. If you want to add Chalk support, go ahead and you can try to mess around with that. Maybe you have a Chalk watch. If so, that's great. I love my Pebble Time Round. You can try to mess around with those frames, but in this tutorial series, we're going to be working with Applite and Basalt. So down here, we have the app kind. We're going to be leaving this as a watch app so we can have support to interact with the buttons. We will be building a watch face later on in this tutorial series. The app visibility, leave this as always visible. The short name and the long name, I guess you can just leave the same, but this describes it. The short name goes on the watch, the long name goes on the phone. I generally leave these in sync. The menu icon, we're not going to be dealing with this right now. The company name, you can put whatever you want here. I'm just going to put my name, and that will show up in the phone app below your app's name. The version label, this is for when you publish on the App Store. It tracks the versions of your app via this label. So if you have 1.0 as your release, and then you have a new version, you would bump it up to 1.1, and then the next one would be 1.2, etc. So we're going to leave this as 1.0. The app UUID is a unique identifier that is unique to your app specifically. Nobody is ever going to have this identifier unless they copy paste it from your project or whatever. You can generate a new one if you want. I don't know for what reason you'd ever want to do that, but the option's there. The JavaScript handling, we're going to leave this as CommonJS style. Don't worry about that. We're going to come back to these app message keys in a later tutorial. And these three checkboxes we are also going to come back to. So that's it for the settings setup. You should have everything good there. And now we're going to go to our source files. So our first source file we're going to create is going to be our main source file. We're going to call it main.c. This is where our code is going to be executed. It's going to be a small file. It's not going to have much, all right? So it's already set us up with the Pebble header here. I'm going to get to that in a sec. But before we do that, I'm going to set up another two files here. So click the Add New button again. For the file name, let's go with splashwindow.c, and let's click this Create Header button. So just before we click Create, I'm going to talk about the target for a second. So we're going to be using app/watchface for all of our files. Do not worry about the background worker. The worker is a background process you can use if you're writing, for example, an app that maybe has to run in the background, calculate something in the background. use the accelerometer or whatever. We're not going to be doing that just yet, at least in this series. And the file type, we're still doing a C file. Click create, and it should set up 2 new files for you. You've got a splashwindow.c and a splashwindow.h. So I'm going to show you what the difference is between these. So the C file is where your actual code goes. This is where the magic happens. But in your H file, this is a header file. So it's known to, you're implementing the functions from your C file, you're defining them in this H, and then you can copy the header file and include it. Well, not copy it, but you can include it in your other C files so that those functions are exposed in that C file. So if I have a function in Splash Window, just for example, if I have a function called hello, and I go and include my splashwindow.h in my main.c, and then, use hello, I can use the function from splashwindow.c because it's exposed in splashwindow.h. We will actually be using that in this tutorial. So now you have those files set up, we are going to actually be writing something with it. So the first starting point of a Pebble app, and this is actually the starting point of a C program, is a function called main, which has the return type of an integer. No parameters, and that's it. This is the first thing that is called in your Pebble app. So what you actually have to do in every single Pebble app is call app event loop. This has no parameters, but what this does is executes the event loop of your app, so it runs through all the processes, and this basically holds your app from deinitializing until you destroy the very last window on your stack. If you don't understand the window on the stack thing, don't worry about that. We're going to cover that in a minute. So right now, if you installed this app, it would do nothing. You would click it and it would maybe briefly pop open for a second and just close itself because you are displaying no things called windows. You need a window to show on your screen, and as long as there's a window in your app running, then your app will stay alive, provided it doesn't crash. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go into our splashwindow.c file, and in here we're going to write our first window. So the syntax for a window, it's just called a window with a capital W, and we're going to call it splash window. We're going to use the camelback syntax. So here we've set up our splash window, and we're going to create a function called splash window create. No parameters. And what this is going to do is allow us to call this from outside of this splashwindow.c file so we can create an instance of this window. So we're going to take this splash window here, and we're going to use the window create function. The window create function creates a new window for you, and we're going to set the splash window equal to that. Now what we have to do is give this window handlers. Now what handlers allow you to do is load the it's events. Windows are event based. So when the window loads, you can have a handler that is called when the windows load. You can have a handler that's called when the windows unload. I think you can have one when the window appears, disappears. You can check it out in the Pebble documentation. We're going to be using the load and unload handlers. So the syntax for this function is window set window handlers, and the first parameter is the window that you want to set your handlers onto. So we're going to type splash window, and then here we're going to set up a struct with a couple of members, but we're going to want to cast it to window handlers, the window handler struct. Then we're going to type .load equals splash window load, comma, .unload equals splash window unload. Okay, so this is probably pretty confusing, right? Well, don't worry about this. I'm going to explain it to you right now. So remember in our Intro to Programming series, if you watch that, how we set up a struct so that it had members like integer and boolean, and we were able to access those through the pointer. Well, this is like that, except it's not a pointer, it's a literal struct. And we're setting the load member equal to this function, which we're going to set up in a minute. And we're setting this unload member equal to this splash window unload function, which we're also going to set up. So all we're doing here really is passing in the window, and then we're passing in a struct that we're creating right in the function. So you could actually take this struct and you could set up like a window handlers variable called handlers, set it equal to this, and then you could pass in this handlers variable like this, and it would work. But we're just going to do it in the function because it's nice that way. It's clean and simple. So now we've set our window handlers, we're going to set up our actual window handler functions. So the first one must have this syntax. It must have the same name, the same identifier that you provided in the .load. So if this is splash window load, great. If you named it something else, make sure you name it the same thing for your function name. For the parameters, we have one parameter, and that's a window local to the function, and I always name this window. So now we're going to set up the same syntax for our unload function, except with a different name. Whatever you named your unload function, make sure you have the same name there. Okay, I know we're moving pretty fast here, but we got a lot of stuff to cover. So now we've set up our load and unload functions. Perfect. So what's going to happen here is this window is going to be created, and whenever the window is pushed onto the stack, so when it's pushed onto the display so you can actually see the window, this function is going to be called the window load function. So this is where we're going to be putting all of our layer magic that I'm going to show you soon. The unload function is going to be called when the window is taken off the stack. So when it's being disposed, this is what's going to be called. So you're going to be able to destroy your resources here so you can save space. Okay, great. So now we've got this create function. Let's also quickly make a destroy function. So one called splash window destroy. And we're going to call window destroy on this. So splash window. And we're also going to make one more function that's going to return a window pointer called splash window get window. And it's going to return this splash window. Okay. So this is nice because we cannot access this variable outside of this C file. If we went into our main.c file, even though they had included this splashwindow.h file, we have not exposed this variable. We haven't made it external in any way. So we need this convenience function to return the splash window to us. And that's basically it. Okay, great. So now we've got these three functions that we're going to have to use. So what I'm going to do here is copy this little block of code, save my file, go over to my splashwindow.h, and here, this is how you set up your header file for functions. Take away all the content, just put a semicolon on the end, all right? It's like this. This is how your three functions should look. So you have the return type still, you still have the identifier, whatever parameters you have, okay? My bad. Whatever parameters you have, and then a semicolon on the end. So return type, identifier, parameters, semicolon. Simple as that, right? Now you've exposed those, and we can use those in our main.c. Okay, perfect. So now let's set up our splash window. So splash window create, and then we're going to call window stack push. So this is a Pebble function, and what this lets you do is push a window on the stack. So we're going to pass in our splash window. So call splash window get window. All right, and we're going to pass one more parameter of true, and this parameter right here is an animated parameter. So if you pass false and you already had another window on the stack, it wouldn't animate. And normally I think it has like a little it moves to the left animation. So yeah, I usually just set this as true. Then below our app event loop, we're going to call splash window destroy. So that gets rid of our stuff. Okay, and now we're going to hope that we typed everything right. We're going to click run. Oh, okay, first try, guys. Nice. Hope you got it first try as well. Whew, take a deep breath. Just got through a lot of code there. Don't forget to rewind the video, pause the video whenever you need. Just make sure you're getting all of the content down. Okay, so now Sweet. This is our awesome weather app. You can see it's pretty advanced. It's a white screen. Not very exciting, I know. So let's set up something in our splash window load function. What we're going